ladies, gentlemen, and fellow submariners. I am not going to use a microphone, so if you have trouble hearing me, raise your hand or move closer. We're here today to honor the submariners who've gone before us, and those who dedicated their lives, and those who lost their lives in the U.S. Navy submarine service, defending and protecting the United States of America so that we can live in a free country and enjoy the freedoms we have. The U.S. Navy submarine service was born 121 years ago on April 11th, 1900, the day that the U.S. purchased its first submarine, the USS Holland, SS-1, from John P. Holland for the sum of $160,000. That was a lot in 1900. U.S. Submarine Service has a long, honorable, and proud history of brave and daring men, going deep underwater in steel hulls to defend and protect our country and our way of life. This group of men, the submariners, are the elite of the Navy, the elite of the fleet, and the elite of all the armed services. It's a brotherhood with a camaraderie that only a submariner can fully understand. These men live together in very close quarters. They sleep, eat, and work together, fight together, and they also pray and play together. To earn dolphins, one must have the knowledge of all the systems and weapons on the submarine, because it's this knowledge that may save the ship in an emergency. Submariners trust and depend on one another to do their jobs, and that part, do their jobs, okay. During the past 121 years, 65 submarines have been lost. 1 in World War I, 52 in World War II, and 16 in peacetime. The first submarine was lost the USS F4 SS-23 on 25th of March 1915 during submarine maneuvers off of Honolulu. It sank 1.5 miles from the harbor in 51 fathoms, which is 306 feet of water, with the loss of all 21 men aboard. The cause is believed to have been a seawater leak into the battery compartment. In World War I, there was only one submarine lost, the F1, with a crew of 19. During World War II, the submarine force performed extraordinarily well. Although submarines comprised less than 2% of the fleet, it sank 30% of the Japanese naval fleet, including 8 carriers, 1 battleship, and 11 cruisers. It also sank 60% of the Japanese merchant fleet, sinking 2,400 ships, totaling 4.9 million tons. And it rescued 504 aviators. The first George Bush was one of those aviators that a submarine rescued. This, however, came at a tremendous cost. The submarine service suffered the highest loss rate of any service. 52 submarines were lost. Of the 160,000 submariners who served in World War II, 3,506 perished, which included 3,131 enlisted and 375 officers. The early days of the submarine before World War II were spent developing a better submarine and learning how to successfully operate a submarine. World War II was when the book on how to conduct submarine warfare was written in blood, and the U.S. submarine legacy was formed. A proud tradition, including wisdom and knowledge and principles, were formed that carries on today and is embedded in all submariners, including those of today with sophisticated nuclear power plants for propulsion, computers, ballistic missiles, advanced capability torpedoes, cruise missiles, and intercontinental ballistic missiles. Submarines are fondly known as boats. The reason is, in the early days, they were boats. The definition of a boat by the Navy is a ship or boat that's small enough to be put on a ship. In the olden days, they were small, and they had to be carried by ships to the deployed area wherever they were going to fight. Today, our submarines are really ships, with the displacement of a cruiser of World War II. However, we still refer to them as boats, for tradition's sake, but mainly I do it to irritate our surface ship brethren. After World War II, we entered the period known as the Cold War, during which submariners continued to perform extremely well, protecting and defending the United States. For years, we've been asked, how fast and how deep can a submarine go? For years, the standard response, unclassified response, was in excess of 400 feet and in excess of 20 knots. Now we're allowed to say in excess of 800 feet and in excess of 30 knots. My first submarine, the Grenadier, was a diesel boat, which was built right after the World War II, but it was basically a World War II submarine, which had two batteries. The Grenadier was a Guppy, greater underwater propulsion power. We had 4 batteries. We could stay submerged about 12 hours at slow speeds and 5 knots. She could do 17 knots submerged with the 4 batteries, but only for 30 minutes, and then had to service to recharge batteries or snorkel. Today, our nuclear submarines can stay submerged for months at a time, cruise at full speed for weeks at a time, and they make oxygen out of seawater. In 1968, when I reported to my first submarine, the USS Tenosa SSN 606 out of New London, Connecticut, she could go faster and deeper than any Soviet anti-submarine torpedo at the time. That was very comforting. Just make your test depth all ahead flank. I believe that the prevention of another major world war has been, in large part, due to the submarine force, both attack submarines and missile submarines. U.S. missile submarines have conducted strategic deterrent patrols since the 60s and continue to do so until even today. If the president were to give the order to launch missiles, the first missile will be on its way to the target in less than 15 minutes. The Soviets and our enemies know this, and we wanted them to know it, that if there was a nuclear exchange, they could not win. Even now, Trident missile submarines are on patrol, ready to launch, protecting our nation and our freedom. And I'm willing to bet most Americans don't know this. Our attack submarines played a large role and performed extremely well. They operated covertly, collected intelligence, and operated in the Arctic, under the Arctic ice, and performed special operations. In other words, a routine training mission in the North Atlantic. They are also on stations such that a Soviet or enemy missile submarine were to approach our coast and start to launch missiles, our attack submarines would guarantee that they would never complete it. USS Louisville, SSN 724, with 12 vertical cruise missile tubes, with Tomahawk missiles, plus the 4 torpedo tubes, was on duty in Pearl Harbor. During Operation Desert Storm, Louisville made history by firing the first submarine-launched Tomahawk missile in war. To accomplish this, she left Pearl Harbor and conducted a 14,000-mile submerged transit at high speeds across the Pacific, across the Indian Ocean, and into the Red Sea, and fired a Tomahawk cruise missile shortly after noon 19 January 1991. For this, the Louisville was awarded the Navy Unit Commendation for exceptional meritorious service. Our submarines today are like Star Wars ships. If you go in the control room, you'd think you were on the USS Enterprise spaceship. They're highly sophisticated and extremely capable. The submariners of today are very intelligent, sharp, and capable young men who must know much more than we had to know in our time. Yet the submarine tradition of those who went before us and led the way and who left their legacy remains firmly entrenched in all submariners. For a submarine is basically a submarine, and a submariner is still a submariner. Once a submariner, always a submariner. Just look around the room today. We're all in great debt to those who went before us and who gave their lives in the service of our country. The legacy will live forever. Today we remember and honor them. Let us never forget the sacrifice of the submariners who went before us and not take it lightly, and let us ensure that they did not die in vain. Let us pray for our submariners now on patrol, keeping the country free, and also pray for all of our troops who are deployed in harm's way. God bless America. Thank you.